Dr. Shante Smalls. I'm going to just welcome you all to the first live Wednesday weekly Dharma gathering hosted by Shambhala Online, Kalapa Media, myself, and Adriana DeFazio at the bottom. And tonight we have the pleasure of Arthi Tejuja teaching us, but I'll let Adriana introduce her in a moment. I just want to say a few things. I'm just going to give myself 3 minutes about how this got started. So I live in New York, and we have had a tradition in New York since the 90s of having Tuesday weekly Dharma gatherings. And a few years ago, maybe about 8 years ago, the technology came about, and Shambhala New York started podcasting, and other people in other Shambhala centers and around the world started listening, and people said they were really helpful. As some of you know, the New York Shambhala Center closed its doors in early December because our rent was $30,000 a month US, and we decided that that was too much money, and that we would really go dark this year and see what arises. So in the interim, I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could come together and have something that's not just New York, but that's accessible for the whole world, because we have the internets. And I really wanted to also hear from teachers from all over the place, not just New York City. So Adrian and I contacted a number of teachers and said, hey, we're partnering with Shambhala Online and Kalapa Media. Are you interested? And a lot of people said yes. So we have teachers booked through June. And if you're interested in teaching, or we've emailed you and you haven't responded, please feel free to email Adriana, and we can get you on the teaching schedule starting in July. So this has really been a team effort. I really want to thank Ashley Dinges. I want to thank Mimi, the Dean of Shambhala Online. I want to thank Adriana. I want to thank Arthi for agreeing to be our first teacher. And I couldn't think of a better person to teach us this week and any week. So I really hope you enjoy tonight. Adriana will be your host for tonight, and I'll turn it over to her. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adriana DeFazio, and I'd like to welcome you to our first live weekly Dharma gathering with Shambhala Online. Tonight's session will begin with a guided meditation, a talk by our teacher, Arthi Tejuja, and end with a Q&A discussion. Arthi Tejuja is the former Director of Social Engagement for Shambhala International, where she worked with Shambhala centers globally to help shift the community's current insular culture to a more outward and engaged approach. Arthi currently runs her own organization, Spiritual Activism, which offers new tools to activists who struggle with the weight of emotions they face when fighting for a more balanced world. She also works with spiritual communities and individuals with strong spiritual practices who want help stepping out and engaging the world with conscious awareness. Arthi has served in a variety of roles with a diverse array of groups. She has managed youth programs, served on the boards of nonprofits, Restored Hope, who advocate for underserved women and children, as well as Arrow Collective, and participated in interfaith dialogues. In 2015, Pope Francis invited her to participate in a Buddhist-Catholic dialogue in Rome. She successfully co-led 2 youth summits and 3 large mindfulness conferences created collaboratively with nonprofits and interfaith groups. Arthi lives with her husband, Matt, and kitties, Steve and Moshi. For the Q&A portion, we will facilitate questions via the raise hand feature on Zoom. If you are selected for a question, then you will be spotlighted to ask your question on screen. Tonight's session will be recorded, so if you'd prefer not to be seen, please take off your camera feature. Please note that you will also be recorded when asking a question. The recording of tonight's gathering can be accessed tomorrow in your My Programs tab on your Shambhala Online account. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to Arthi, our teacher for this evening.
It's very interesting knowing that you're all out there listening to me, and I can't see your faces. It's quite interesting to not completely be aware of who I'm speaking with. So I'm just finding myself getting used to that. But it's wonderful to be here. So thank you for having me. We'll get started tonight with just a little bit of sitting meditation. And I'll guide it, and then we'll sit together in silence. So wherever you are, whether you're on the floor or on a cushion or in a chair, find a good posture for you. If you're sitting on a chair, you may want to come forward and not lean too far back, and not lean too far forward, but just something with a straight back and just relaxed. And our hands are going to be on our thighs, just relaxed, shoulders relaxed. And our eyes are going to be 4 to 6 feet out in front of us. Our feet on the floor, or cross-legged if you're sitting on the floor. Just allow yourself to feel your physical form, your body, what it feels like to sit on the earth, sit on the chair, and just be held upright. Just get a sense of what it feels like to be in the space. Feeling of your bottom sitting on the chair, on the cushion. Feeling of your back upright. Sense of the temperature of the room. Any smells that you might smell. Just the experience of the outer world that's around you. Any sounds that might be there in whatever space you're in. Just allow that to be there. Notice it. Then let yourself come in to your inner world. Notice any feelings that might be arising right now. It's anger, sadness, joy, spaciousness. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, you don't even have to name it. Just get a sense of it. Whatever it is that you're feeling right now, just notice. Don't have to do anything with it. Don't have to push it away. Just notice. Just being curious as to what's there in our experience right now. Then notice feeling of breath. It goes out, comes back in, goes out again. It's that feeling of breath coming in, coming out. Always there. You don't always notice it, but it's always there. Notice any thoughts that might be coming into your experience. Maybe you've had a long, busy day and your thoughts are just going and going. And notice if they're really, really fast thoughts or really, really slow thoughts. Maybe you feel kind of tired and thoughts might be jumbled. Just notice the quality of your thoughts. All those things, the feeling of breath, the thoughts, feelings, body, the way we interact with the world, through our senses. All of that is what makes us human. You can just be with that. You can just embrace that. You can celebrate that. You can notice and go back to the feeling of breath. In and out. Now when you notice that your thoughts have stolen you away, taken you somewhere else, away from your body, away from the present moment, the current space you're in, just gently come back to the breath, back to the body, back into the room. Each time your mind takes you away, normal and human. Don't have to beat ourselves up for that. Just gently label it thinking if you want to. Just come back to the breath, back to the feeling of the breath in the body. As we bring our session to a close, just notice your heart, feeling of your heart. And remember that we're all connected here, even though we're so many different places. We may not all know each other. We can all feel our hearts together in the same space. We're all connected. We can gently just come back to whatever space we're in. Gently let yourself come back. Then move your body any way you need to move. Stretch. So, hi everyone. I hope you're all doing well, okay, in the midst of what I feel like is such a storm right now. I hope you're taking care of yourself in whatever way that looks like for you. I know I'll just start with this. I wanted to say where I am. I was going to my meditation group that I teach on Tuesday nights on the south side of Chicago. And I had a flat tire. And so luckily there was a Jiffy Lube like right there. And I went in there and took a few hours, but I got my tire changed. But I had to cancel my meditation session. And by the time I came home, it was 8 o'clock and I was exhausted. And I spent the 2 hours while I was in the tire place reading letters and things that were going on in Shambhala. And I don't know how many of you out there are part of Shambhala or part of different spiritual traditions or not. But Shambhala is going through a pretty traumatic time right now. At least I feel like I'm going through a pretty traumatic time. So when I came home last night, I felt traumatized, really traumatized. And my husband said, how are you? And I said, I just feel traumatized. I could feel it in my body. You know? So I said, I just need to lay here on the couch and watch TV. And that's what I needed. And so that's what we did. But there's just a lot happening for those that don't know, there were letters that came out this week from Kusung, who are the people who are Sakyong Mipam Rinpoche's attendants, for close attendants. And some months ago was the abuse that Sakyong Mipam Rinpoche caused came out. Can't even get the timeline straight in my head. It was a while back. And there was sort of a wave. You know, each time something's revealed, it feels like there's like a wave happening of letters, and Charya's writing letters. different people in community writing letters. And then it was interesting because all of that happened some months ago, and it was all over the New York Times and whatnot. There's sort of a wave. Then we all had to sit with that, try to understand that our teacher committed abuse, sexual abuse, other abuse. And then there was that wave, and then I felt like I kind of had to hide out for a while. Like I went into kind of a 3 months of hiding or something. I don't know how long, but I was working for Shambhala, and my job ended in December, and I just felt like I needed to kind of hide for a while. I wasn't really avoiding it, just needing to have a break. And then, then these letters came out really detailing experiences of abuse again. And it was just another wave of just sort of shock and trauma. And that's the way I experienced it. I don't know if everyone experienced it that way. Not sort of surprise for me, I wouldn't say, but just something on a body level, that I could feel. And so, I think someone asked me, do we need to cancel the talk and all this? And I was like, no, I feel like, more than ever, we need to come together as a community. But I think how I would have talked about this topic might have been a little bit different than I'm going to talk about it today. So just to put that out there to start off with, just where I am. So just to give you a little bit of history about me, I spent 2 years working at the Chicago Shambhala Center, really as a director of social engagement, which really meant working with activists and nonprofits and teachers and students, and being out in communities, bringing the Shambhala teachings and meditation into those communities. And I spent 2 years doing that and really trying to figure out how to do that, in all honesty. And then I became the director of social engagement for all of Shambhala, and I did that job for about 2 years. And that was really more about 2 years of working with kind of more internal dynamics, I would say, in the Shambhala community, particularly around race and gender and class, and looking at how restorative justice could be a healing method, transformative justice could be a healing method to work with justice, using tools that could help communities communicate with each other better. And really kind of, and in 2 years, I feel like we were just really at the tip of the iceberg. So I don't feel like we by any means dived in as fully as we could have if we had more time in that. But I feel like we started that work, and by I mean a whole team of us, which is something that felt really important to me, is working in teams and working with each other, and it not just being me, as the leader that's doing it all. So in this last 3 months, I've been really reflecting and thinking about what's next for me, and this new kind of trajectory in my life, which I'm calling spiritual activism, really is focusing on what I've been doing the last 4 years. And it's what I've discovered, that I have realized in my work here, particularly in Chicago, that activists really need spiritual practices, and that spiritual communities really need to better understand how to be activists, and to be kind of given a push, if you will, in some cases. So that's bringing me back to my topic, really, which is about why do activists need, I said meditation, I think, in the description, but why do activists really need spiritual practices, and why do spiritual communities really need to be activists? And so I'll start out with just talking a little bit about activists. And I would say, and many of you might be activists, or consider yourself activists. And some of you may not consider yourself activists. But I'll just say that activists are really, I think, the way I would define it is having a deep awareness of the injustices that are happening in the world, amongst humans or amongst other beings, you know, the animal activists, or Mother Earth, you know, where your ecological activists really come in, and having a really deep awareness of those of the injustices that are taking place. And it's really like an outer awareness that develops from one's own moral compass. So sort of an innate knowing of right and wrong, of what's, I would say, what's just and what is not. And just to give you an example of what I mean by that, I could go back in my own history. I've been thinking about, you know, when did I become an activist, or was I always an activist? And I recalled this story of when I was 10, and I recall just sitting at the dinner table, and my mom had just finished cooking, and she just put the food on the table, and she just sat down, and my father, you know, just as soon as she sat down, said, "Get up and get me a glass of water." And she got up to do it, and I just lost it. I mean, I was like 10, but I felt it sort of, I felt the injustice of the situation in my bones. And I don't even know where that came from. Just was sort of innate, knowing like, no, that's not fine. And I told her to sit down, and I told my dad that he had 2 legs and he should get up and do it himself. And then my dad said to my mom in Sindhi, in the language that they speak, well, you know, tell her something, you know, say something to her. Like, he didn't address me directly. And she turned around and said, "You'll understand, Arti, don't talk like that. You'll understand when you're older." And I just said to her, you know, "I'll never understand this." And what's interesting to me is that now she's actually brought this story up with me in recent years, and she remembers it as well. And I think it was even maybe it was a turning point for her too. But it's just that sort of sense, you know, this like deep knowing of like, no, that's not actually okay. And I think we all have that somewhere inside of us. You know, we all have that. So it's just, that's sort of what I mean by this innate sense of justice that we all have. So activists can range in things. You know, there are people who take action when it's needed. They're like physical action. There are people who provide, a lot of nonprofits, maybe opportunities for those who are maybe not treated as fairly in our society. There are reformers of systems. There are politically speaking out activists, like, you know, people who are pushing politicians to move a certain direction. There are writers who are writing things out there. There are people putting their bodies on the line. So it's really a range, you know, I think it's really a range. And so it's just what I would say about activists. And so what I really learned in Chicago about working with activists and bringing practices to activists is there was a lot of burnout. And there's a lot of depression and fatigue, and it's very tiring work, and a lot of anger, you know. And so the practice, I think this practice and practice that we just did really allows us to stay with the emotions that are arising, and teaches us that we can stay with them instead of sort of just reacting to them all the time. And so there's something about being able to do that, you know, because I mean, a lot of this stuff makes me extremely angry. A lot of the injustices that are taking place makes me extremely angry. There's nothing wrong with the anger. And we're not trying to say that there's something wrong with anger in whatsoever. In fact, the opposite of that is true. I think it's revealing something. But when we are constantly reacting from that anger over and over again, that's not always helpful either. So, you know, the idea is, can we sit with that anger and then react from a place that's coming out of real justice, that's coming out of a kind of deeper place. And so like we can take right action, whatever the moment might call for us in that moment, you know, that there's a knowing, like, I know that this moment is calling me for me to do this. But if we've got all this anger that's clouding it, maybe we won't even make the right judgment. So there's something about the practice, I think, that offers something there. And then it also, for me, it's like doing this practice for me, it's sort of like recharging a battery in some ways. And that work can be extremely hard, difficult. I think about all the secondary trauma you might be taking in working with people who are traumatized, if that's the work you're doing, or something called compassion fatigue, you know, caring so much about others that you're sort of losing yourself, and so you kind of lose your own boundaries, you know. So I think meditation, mindfulness really helps with creating better boundaries. At least it has for myself. Not just meditation and mindfulness, but I know all the warriorship practices in general. And there are spiritual practices in other communities as well that I think, you know, that as well. So it's sort of like a battery or something, recharging battery, and offering that to activists and people who really need that. Everyone needs that, but particularly activists. So then shifting a little bit to the meditation side and spiritual folks or spiritual communities. So that really has been the other kind of sort of part of my job over the last 2 years in Shambhala particularly, is, you know, I've always felt like Shambhala, and I'm talking about Shambhala because I'm particularly from Shambhala, but I've always felt like these tools are really valuable, and that it's a responsibility to really offer them on a wide basis, that we really shouldn't be hoarding them to ourselves, but that they really, like, you know, are helpful, could be helpful to a number of people. And I found that to be true. So that's one thing, a reason for why we act, you know, why we go out there, why we step out of our comfort zone, which might be in our centers, you know, but why we take that step further, because there's really a need. It's really, really, it's hard out there in the world right now, as many of us know. On the flip side of that, we know that these tools have transformed us and they work. On the other hand, we need to be careful of sort of the savior complex. Like, we're going to go in with these tools and we're going to go in and save people, because that's really not it either. It's not about going in and fixing it all, and we don't get to force, you know, our things down anyone's throat. But it's more about learning how to cultivate relationships with people and listening. You know, there's a lot of like going out there and listening, you know, what's needed here, what's needed in this environment or in this community. And it might be going to a lot of meetings, say, and just sitting and listening and sort of learning. Might be just that at first, you know. It's not sort of about going in and offering tools, but it's about listening so that you know what to offer, what's going to help in this situation. And then going beyond that, you know, meditation and mindfulness is all about awareness. And I feel like activism is also about awareness, more kind of wider awareness of the world and of the issues that are maybe going on and taking place in our world. But it's really comes down to awareness. So it's really all about awareness work. And so if we as a spiritual community need to be aware of even just the issues themselves, like politics and the way systems work, you know, how does the jail system work in our country, and what are we doing about in our ecological systems, and what is the history of our country, and how does it impact everything? And just all of these different educational pieces that we need to be aware of, you know, just And then going even further, but in looking into the human dynamics, like what are those human dynamics like race and gender and the historical traumas that are here and the harms that we might be inflicting, and just the complete, you know, awareness of those things. So if you're going to work with another group, for example, what's the group awareness that you have? Where's your place in that group? Where's your place in the larger society out in the world, right? How are you being perceived? You know, what are you being perceived as, an imposter? Like you come in and people don't want you there? Are you being perceived as ignorant? Are you being perceived as whatever way you might be being perceived? But just noticing that, right? And noticing, what are my biases? What are those things inside of me? And those are things that I don't think that meditation actually helps. You know, those kind of go beyond just simple mindfulness. Mindfulness is great, but we also need to be mindful of the issues, and we need to be mindful of our biases. And we need to understand conflict a little better. We need to kind of look at some of these other things. And so in the last couple of years, I really felt like in Shambhala particularly, you know, and then that kind of leads to where we are now, like in our community particularly. We have these great practices, and we spent all this time with meditation and these deeper practices that are amazing and have been life-changing for myself, and I'm sure for many others. On the flip side, you know, we've really ignored something else, I think, you know, and you know, were we not aware of the abuse that was taking place? And if we were aware, then where was our sense of justice in that? You know, where was our sense of action? Where was our sense of ethics? You know, what is just, and where are we ignorant, and what kind of values do we really have? You know, how do we work with each other in conflict? What are tools that we don't have in our community that we can really learn from other communities? You know, we really have to be open to that. And I hope that what's going on now will make us open to that. I have no idea where any of this is going to go, or whether we're even going to survive as a community. You know, that's just, who knows. But it's an opportunity, I think. It's an opportunity to go somewhere and to acknowledge these things, and to work with a larger sense of awareness, you know, instead of being so insular in the way that we have. So I'm going to pause there. And I know the Q&A is not supposed to technically start for 10 minutes, but I just feel like I want it to be a little bit more of a conversation. I don't want to be a talking head. So I would really love to hear from you, and to hear how you're feeling and doing, and where you're at in all of this, and what you think of this idea of stepping out. And I'll just end with one more thing. In this craziness, in this conflict, the one thing that I feel really strong about is like, some people wanted to just leave, and all these different reactions, all valid reactions. And my own reaction was, I want to step back into the world, and I want to offer the things and the tools that I've learned that have changed me and have been so valuable to me, have even saved my life, I would say. I want to offer that to other people. So whatever's going on in the community, that's something I know. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts and hear what you have to say about all of this. Can we open this up to Q&A?
Hi, everyone. So for the Q&A portion, the way that it works, that on your right-hand panel, there should be an option to raise your hand. Once you raise your hand, I'll select you to come onto the screen and ask your question.
Hi,
Hi. Can you hear me?
I can. How are
Okay.
you?
Good. How are you? Um, I have a question. So I've been reading, probably the same letters and comments that you have, and I was wondering if I've also heard people talk, particularly people that have been around a lot longer. I've only been in Shambhala about uh, 2 years, I think. Time's going by really fast. I have no concept of time. Um, but the people that have been around a lot longer um, talk about um, our tradition being sort of cut off from the traditions that um, um, were originally part of Shambhala, and that we've kind of isolated ourselves. So I'm wondering if perhaps we re-engaged the other traditions and um, re-engaged, the other schools that sort of made up the original Shambhala idea, if that would sort of reinvigorate the community and maybe kind of open us up so we aren't sort of insulated and cut off from the world.
What's your feeling on that?
Well, I think we should. I mean, I think that you know we I understand that other um, Buddhist centers and traditions bring in people from other traditions, and they learn from each other. And I was reading in Born in Tibet, they would go to different schools to learn and pull information in, and get tools and ideas from other traditions. And I think that perhaps that I think it would be good for us. It would inject some new sort of idea blood into our centers and into our community, and perhaps we could weather this a little better and even share more of our ideals and our values with um, I saw that, Dr. Smalls. The we could share it with the outside world, so even it would help sort of spread the Shambhala idea as well.
So I can only offer my opinion on this. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer in any of this. And by the way, your name is Meredith?
Yes.
Where are you from?
Chicago. Hi.
Oh, hi. Local. Yeah, so I can only offer an opinion on this. I don't have I mean, there's no answers to this right now, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting for me is that my husband is an Enigma practitioner in a completely different tradition. And some years when we first met, I grappled with this idea like, oh my gosh, he's not a Shambhala practitioner. Is this going to work? How are we going to make this work? All these things are secret, and like how, and actually really opened my eyes to a lot. I traveled through India with him, with his teacher, and did a lot of their practices. And something shifted for me in that, so it changed my views. So I'm not sort of opposed to being involved with other traditions. But I also would say that there's something extremely powerful about the Shambhala tradition, particularly. Like, that's my experience. I'm not saying that's everyone's experience. But the Shambhala tradition itself has been really valuable in and of itself, even as a standalone tradition without the other traditions. There's something about it that has been very valuable to me. So, and the Buddha Dharma has been very valuable to me too. I've studied the Buddha Dharma. So, I think they can stand alone, and I think that they can be together. That's just my opinion. But I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer to this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I don't have the video, but can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Rebecca?
Hi. Yes, thanks. Thanks for doing this. Don't have the bandwidth. So my question is about what motivates us as activists. And I've thought this for the 10 or so years that I've practiced in Shambhala, and I am an activist in my professional life, about how we might sometimes rationalize our activism and what we feel is right for other people, and where that is beginning to serve our own ego needs. And as I read the material that we've seen the last couple of days within Shambhala, I think a lot about how can our practice be more incisive about recognizing where we're serving our own ego needs under the guise of doing something that we feel is somehow best for people around us.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to go there as an activist. Like, you think something is right, you go out, you want to offer, you want to do. I go back to, I'm not sure where the practice fits in there, but I like, for me, it's been about deep listening. This is where deep listening really has been the thing for me. I just remember initially in Shambhala, Chicago, having no idea where to start or where to begin. And so naturally I went to these meetings. We were working a lot with nonprofits who were working with youth who were experiencing trauma. And I didn't know a lot about it. And I would just sort of show up and hear and listen and listen and listen. And it was a lot of deep listening and a lot of humbleness, needing to work with humbleness of just not knowing and not thinking that I knew. So there's something sort of in that for me of practicing that, how we practice deep listening in our community a lot with one another, with a dyad, with one-on-one situation. But I'm curious about how we practice deep listening as activists in a larger space, in a larger context.
I think you're right about the power of deep listening and the discipline it takes to not be trying to provide answers to people, but to try to encourage people to find their own. The other thing that listening to you and that brings to mind is, and I'm not talking about Shambhala per se right now, but just generally our culture right now around righteousness and the feeling that we are right, our values should prevail, whatever they are, and how listening, in even shallow listening, seems impossible at that time, and how we might bring our practice to those kinds of situations where first we do want to try to understand others.
Yeah, and I think it's even the meditation practice, it's like practicing holding your seat. And then those difficult emotions that arise, when someone is speaking to you and you disagree, and there's this wave of emotion that goes through you, and you want to react, and so it's like the practice, I think what it can offer is being able to stay with it, being able to sit with whatever's there before we decide to offer our opinion or disagree with somebody or yell at them or whatever it is that we're wanting to do in the moment.
Yeah, well, thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for being on. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Nick.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for putting this on. This has been great. So I'm Nick from Pittsburgh, and my question is about, so we've been talking about things going into the community and offering things. For me, this feels like a very broken moment in Shambhala. It feels like there's a lot of pain and confusion, and I think for me the thing that's sitting most heavily is like this question of, what do we have to offer? If we are the lineage that has produced all of this mess, what, I guess, do we as practitioners have to offer? And then what, if any, do the centers, the various city centers, land centers, what have you, what does Shambhala have to offer? And I really like your framing of the inner work and outer work, but yeah, I guess I'm sort of confused or interested to hear your thoughts about doing outer work in this time where the inner feels very broken.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I think we each have to figure that out for ourselves in some ways. You know, what do we have to offer? I think me personally, you know, what I tend to go out there and offer is tend to go back and think about what this practice did for me personally and how it changed me and shifted me, and what it has meant to me personally, and this path has meant to me in a personal way. I have all sorts of challenges with community. I'm not, not gonna lie, but there's something about this practice that I've learned that is about connecting to our own humanity, our own humanness, as someone here has offered, but our own, being able to accept all of the good, all of the bad in ourselves. It's like we do the practice, and there's good thoughts and there's bad thoughts and there's all sorts of things that we see and habits and all that. And it's all about, acceptance of all of that, acceptance of everything. And so what I see personally, when I go, because I been teaching this meditation class on the South Side on Tuesdays, and it's not a Shambhala center. It's kind of a yoga and healing studio, called a healing studio. And it is so interesting to me how hungry people are for this kind of a practice, for this kind of healing. But it's not, we're not giving them the healing, like here, you're going to be healed, but here's a practice that you can do that, where you can really tap into your own humanity, where you can start to become aware of your own habits. And so there's something in that I'm still going out there, I still see people wanting. And yes, as a community, it's definitely don't have all the answers. We have some things that work. We have some things that we are really good at, that just because all of this is going on, that doesn't mean that we've never done anything good, and that nothing that we've ever done as a community has been positive or good, or that we've never offered anything. So it's like we have offered some things that are good, and we've really effed things up too. So I don't know, it's both. For me, it's both. I don't feel like that we don't have anything to offer. But we also, I think, each have to figure out how it's changed us, because I think that's the thing that we can offer, is how it's changed us. I don't know if that makes any sense. Are you still there, Nick?
I am still here. Yes, and I think it makes a ton of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, is there anything else you want to follow up on with that, or?
No,
Okay.
I'm sure we'll all be in conversation about these things for years, and so I'm set for now.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Artie. How are
Hi,
you?
Ann. Good. How are you?
Just fine.
I don't know if good is the right way to phrase it, but
I
basically
understand. I just wanted to react to give you some feedback of what you had said. I really liked the idea that awareness is kind of the key to spiritual communities as well as activist communities, and that there's intentionality both places, and so that awareness can, you know, help each community as they work with the other. And the other thing is that for me personally, everything that's been happening has been made me very angry and very confused and not kind of sure how I'm feeling about the teachers versus the teachings. But your I hear from you a little bit, kind of a call to action, which is, you know, go out there and share this. And that's very helpful for me because it helps me kind of get out of my head and what is this doing for me, and helps me recognize all the good and why I've been in this community for so long and want to continue with the teachings in whatever, you know, form still resonates with me. So yeah, but I thank you for that kind of bodhisattva approach to the whole thing. So yeah.
yeah, I'm offering that because that's how I've been working with it. You know, I'm very fortunate that when I was in Chicago, I got to take on the role that I did, because I feel like in some ways I'm going back to that. And I just remember how magical it was. I mean, I would describe it as magical. You know, I would go into spaces and then I would just know what to do next. And, you know, it was like the universe conspiring with me to bring me into the right spaces, and things would just magically happen. I feel like I want to go back to that, you know? So yeah, so that's where that comes from.
No, it feels very healthy and it feels very positive to me, and I'm searching and seeking for the positive and to keep it top of mind. So thank you for the message.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Hi, Sheila.
Hi,
Hi.
Auntie. I'm Sheila from Southern Colorado.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I've seen your name a lot, but I don't think we've ever met. I'm not sure how to formulate my question, so I'll talk a little bit and maybe a question will come out of it. Thinking a little bit about what you said about anger and working with anger, and also just looking at what has occurred in our community and how so much of it had to do with people being minimized, people's experience being minimized when they did speak up about things, and that, you know, are not paid attention to or downplayed or questioned or whatever, you know. And I'm just curious what your experience has been working in community. Hearing that you say that community is challenging. I think community is challenging for all of us. What starts to crack that? Like, I feel like right now, like, things have just like totally like they've been exploded open, but it would have been nice if we could have worked with it before the explosion, you know. And like, people have been sort of trying to make little cracks for decades, but it didn't happen. So I'm just curious of your observations and what your experience has been working with Shambhala and trying to move us along in terms of more awareness. Yeah, I think that's my question.
Yeah, it was a difficult 2 years. And I can't share this story now, but the story of the Chicago Shambhala Center and how I left in not such a good way is really kind of key to this. And I've already started writing that story out because I feel like it's an important story to tell in all these stories, as these stories unfold. But it's been very challenging. It's been a tough nut to crack, if you will. And the way I worked with it is, you had your pillars and all that. And I started realizing I would call it infiltrating. We're going to need to infiltrate this pillar. We're going to need to infiltrate that pillar. We're going to need to go and, get into the MI trainings and, put some things in there. And we're going to need to slip some things in the guide trainings. And, we're going to need to slip it all over the place, And I also realized I could not do that alone. So I think the first year I spent just forming a team, getting to know people in different centers. And I would hear about people. And they were hard to find because they weren't necessarily the directors of centers or, the big, acharyas or the shastris or, they didn't have titles, so I was trying to find people, and I still don't think I found them all, but ended up with a good 50 to 70 people and, and helping me, put this stuff in where it belonged, where it needed to belong. And I think it did start to crack some things. I think I just recall when the Kalpa Council first completely cracked, I feel like we had a big hand in pushing on that. And we were pushing, I think just, a lot of what isn't being talked about even right now, because I think we're still talking about sexual harm and violence, but there's also, we haven't even really touched race that much yet. And there's a lot of white supremacy going on in our centers as well. And there's a lot of other injustices that are taking place. So we haven't even cracked that. But we were starting to, and it has to be, it could have been done more gently. I don't think it needed to be this eruption, but maybe it did. I certainly wasn't aware of the abuse at the top. That I can tell you, like, I did not know about that. So maybe it did need to be like that, this explosive. But a lot of what I was doing was inserting modules in the existing things. Really wanted to have peace circles and things like interplay and more communal practices that we could do, conflict circles and training people on how to host those and hold those kinds of spaces when there is conflict. Because if a community has a natural way of dealing with a conflict and everybody knows it works, then people are going to be more inclined when there's a conflict to just get into that forum and do it. And those are tools that we've just never had in Shambhala. And part of it is that people were not open to it either. Even my own Chicago center trying to bring in peace circles, and it was not easy. So it was a tough nut to crack. So I don't know if it had to be explosive. Maybe it did.
What is a peace circle?
A peace circle is a restorative justice practice. It's being used a lot in educational settings now, in criminal justice settings, but it's bringing people together in a circle, and you have what's called a circle keeper. It comes from First Nations spiritual practices. You have what's called a talking stick, and it's being passed around person to person, and it allows each person to tell their story based on whatever you're actually doing. Maybe you're having a conflict circle, but you also could be having a celebration circle or whatnot. So it's a particular form that allows people to speak or not speak if they choose to pass. And the circle, you come up with communal values that you want to hold the circle in so that you kind of don't deviate from that. So there's a lot more to it than that. But it's just, there are all these forms that sort of exist that are outside of Shambhala that I think could work really great in Shambhala. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, So there's a lot out there I think that we could learn from, and that's what I had started to bring in when all this kind of erupted and cracked.
Yeah,
which I still think we need.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi.
Hi. Oh, I wasn't warned. I think my initial inspiration, or the thing that I'm grappling with, and I see this more as a conversation than, I don't think I'm really, I'm asking, this is the question that I'm currently asking myself. The activism world and the idea that we have a natural, and I think the Shambhala teachings speak to that we have a natural intelligence about that which is right and that which is wrong and which is constructive and that which is not. And then what happens is we get into this very solid position and we ram our head against the world, like the phenomenal world wall. And very often that is our main feedback loop, right? It's hard to have a, I wonder, are there any, for myself, I mean, when you look at other communal movements like communism or the psycho stuff in the 17th, they always had communal practices in which they would look at the interactions that occurred, would reflect on them, and would try to allow people to address those. I find that in our natural hierarchy structure, a lot of the stuff is just supposed to fall to the side. It's just being constantly swept under the carpet to allow for form and for decorum and to manage all that which is really unmanageable. So, and I think there are these, and I think activism kind of brings that out because then we have to take a position. We can't do the spiritual thing like, okay, I have a thought, I let it go. I have an opinion, I let it go. I see what's right and I let it go. I see what's wrong and I let it go. Ultimately, that is, of course, in the end, that is the position. I strongly believe in. I come from the recovery world, so the step 8, step 9, that's where the healing is. In the ability to let something go, in the ability to forgive, in the ability to connect in the trauma with those who have caused it, and to connect with those who I've caused harm to. But I find it extremely difficult to look at the different dynamics in the one world, activism, and in the other, my spiritual practice. Sometimes I seem to, when I don't want to work with the tools in that world, I use the other ones just to get out from under. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Sounds familiar?
Can you tell me how you say your name?
Oh, Sanjay. West Tibetan pronunciation.
Sanjay. Okay. Where are you from?
I'm in Halifax.
Okay.
Originally from Germany, though.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious about where everybody is.
Oh, sorry, I should have introduced myself. I was just so surprised.
No, it's totally fine. I'm trying to think about what to say. I personally, for me, the practice is the ground from where my activism springs. So I feel like there's a space for both, that they're not really separate from each other, but they work together. Mm-hmm. I think that's why I wanted to do this talk. It's like spirituality needs activism needs spirituality. They go hand in hand. There's something, I think, in Shambhala particularly, we talk about the teachings of enlightened society, but in a lot of ways, I felt like a lot of our teachings were based on basic goodness, and we never got to the enlightened society. And what does enlightened society even look like? I don't even know if we've been having those conversations. But they're not separate for me. They go hand in hand somehow. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, yes, maybe you're taking a position in the activist world, but it's not necessarily right. Is it about right or wrong all the time? Or is it more about what are the different viewpoints that are there? Right? Is there an answer? Is there an answer in the activist world? Is there an answer to something?
Is there a goal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But is there, in the case of like justice, right? What's right or wrong in a particular situation? You know, there might be different viewpoints, but is there something that we could actually, we may come to a point where we agree to disagree, but can we still be there together? I mean, I think that's what meditation offers, is like the ability to still be there together, even with different viewpoints in the same space.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was kind of more looking at the experience of the traps. You know, sure, I think for most of us who are connected with Shambhala and who have also, I think most of us in Shambhala have a sense of, you know, we really want to do something about the world, to change the world. We're not just there to sit on our cushions. That's not the original motivation why we showed up. I mean, there's, of course, but I also find myself, when I look at my past and where I'm now at, I'm in an organization that I discovered to be, I mean, I always knew it was misogynistic. I always knew it was deeply patriarchal. I always knew that the hierarchies were not informed to create a liberated experience for the individual. I always knew that, but I thought it was worth it. Now I realize that question may not be answered so clearly. So I use the spiritual tools to, you know, get out of the dissonance. And I wonder what is in my spiritual teaching toolkit that should have awoken me to that. Because awareness, of course, is at the basis of all that, but we go in deep sleep.
Yep.
Right?
I don't know that Shambhala had the tools, in all honesty. This is my opinion.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm only my opinion. I don't know that Shambhala, honestly, right now has the tools to discover that kind of awareness. I've had to discover it outside of Shambhala. You know, that's why I'm saying, like, there are tools out there, I think, that are in line with Shambhala principles, right? But that are already there. I think that are more communal tools, right? Or tools that work with justice or conversation, or can provide deeper awareness in a communal way. There's communal awareness, right? And
what would you think is the biggest obstacle right now to implement that, to get this spread out? Apart from your personal difficulties with...
I have no idea if there's an obstacle now, like because everything's blown up. But before everything blew up, people were just not wanting it. You know, there was a lot of pushback. Some centers were naturally more open than others, so it just depended on the center. But some of them were very closed, like, that's not a Shambhala thing. But what about this? But that's not a Shambhala thing. We don't know what that is. You know, like a fear-based thing. Right? And then, you know, but I mean, some centers were a lot more open to it. So it really just depended on the people. You know, and now maybe there's total openness to it. I have no idea.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So it sounded like, do we still have time for one more? Okay. Karen?
Anyone hear you?
Yep,
oh, I see I'll just stand up.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. First, a moment of levity. When you were picking up your mug to drink, I thought it was Linda Carter as Wonder Woman. It's not Linda Carter as Wonder Woman, it's the Mona Lisa. But either way, it was a good, positive female message. So what this brings up for me is that I've gone through my experience of being a hot mess, and now I'm in a group that's in a hot mess. And actually just owning that with others and allowing them to see that I'm sitting with it sort of gives them permission to have their difficulties too. It opens things up, creates some breathing space. So I felt like when Nick was speaking and I was resonant to what he was saying, that even though, no, we don't have the answers, but we're sitting with it, we're going to work with it. In our peace circles, we listen lots and we have a little time to do our speaking, and the listening grows us more, I think. I think that's a major contribution, and that's the right way to start a conversation. So I appreciate what you're doing. And I think it's going to be okay. I think it's going to be cathartic, and wherever we end up, it'll be more open, and we'll work with that. So thank you, Wonder Woman.
Thank you for offering that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that's the last question. Thank you so much to everybody that is out there that I didn't get to connect with and see. But thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the dialogue. I'm sure that we'll connect more. This is just going to be ongoing conversation, you know. I don't have the answers to everything. I'm sure you don't have the answers to everything either. And some of us are just gonna have to sit there and kind of feel what's gonna happen in some sense. I just sort of feel like I'm on some crazy ride. And yeah, I don't know where that will take me or where that will take us, but I'm grateful to be with all of you. I'm grateful to be in this work together, and I appreciate you. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Right. Thank you, Arthi, so much for that talk and discussion. I just have a few announcements. So tonight's talk is recorded and will be posted and accessible via the My Programs tab on your Shambhala Online account within the next 24 hours. We invite you to join us next week for our next live weekly Dharma gathering with Dr. Claudel Glasgow for a talk titled On Silence, Skillful Means for Modern Times. You can find more details and register for next week or for any of the talks in the weekly Dharma gathering series via the link that I just sent through the chat box, and also just via Shambhala Online. Yeah, but thank you, everyone. Thank you, Arthi, and we'll see everyone soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Oh, we should have ended with a bow. Thank you.
Tell your friends, come next week.
Claudel's awesome for anybody
Claudel's
that's
amazing.
on this bill.
Claudel's amazing. Dr. Glasgow's amazing. I'll be hosting her, them, all pronouns. Thank you. Thank you, Arthi.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Great.
Thanks for creating the space for this.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you both. I'm going to end the meeting so the recording ends as well.
Perfect.
But okay, great.
Awesome.
Bye.